there's nothing that the first time you launch an arrow out of a bow, you can't equate that to anything you do with a rifle.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing like it in the firearms world. I mean, even I would venture to say crossbows because you're still shooting that rifle style.
Right.
There's nothing that compares to it. It's a completely different animal, and that was, again, going back to learning curves. It was like, oh, this is way different than I thought it was going to be. So,
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. I'm Sam, I'm your podcast host for this week. Our podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company, and you guys will learn a little bit more about them later on in our episode today. I'm sitting down here in person with a gentleman I've gotten to know over the past several months a lot better, and we're here to tell your story, Mike, a story that, to my knowledge, may have not been told on a scale like this before.
definitely not.
We want to share it. So Mr. Mike Behrens is my guest this week. Mike, if you would start us off, just kind of give us an idea on who you are and kind of your background, where you come from, and all that good stuff.
Well, first, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a long drive, but I did make it. Yeah, crossing that road was rough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in Iowa. I am a prototypical farm kid. I chucked hay bales as a kid, did all that fun stuff. Never really got into any hunting or anything like that outside of shooting a pellet gun and knocking down crows and stuff like that. But we were athletes too, so I spent most of my youth playing sports and doing all that fun stuff, and then helping on the farm outside of those practice times and game times. And then from there, just kind of went on and did the whole college thing. Ended up joining the National Guard in Iowa in 97, so that dates me. But yeah, I joined the National Guard in 97, went through, did, I think it was like 10 years or something like that. Got out for about 3 years and missed it a little bit too much to deal with, so I ended up doing another 6, and that satisfied me in full. So, but what I didn't know at the time, which this kind of leads into another guest you recently had.
Yes.
What I didn't know at the time was a lot of the stuff that, I thought was just normal wear and tear on the body as you get older wasn't normal wear and tear. So enter Mr. Demshock, who, he guided me through a process, and he kind of elaborated on that a few weeks back. But yeah, he guided me through a process, and that whole process ended up really kind of freeing things up and helping me get not necessarily back on my feet, but more on my feet.
Yeah.
Getting some things taken care of that I didn't know could be taken care of and things like that. So, yeah, a lot more physical now than I ever thought I would be, as far as that goes. But, outside of working for the railroad right now, which is where I met him, I'm pretty much just hanging out and doing my woodworking stuff and playing around in the backyard.
Yeah.
So a lot of work. I mean, the property that we have now, it's way more than I expected to get. I was looking for 1 or 2 acres or something like that, just something to build a shop on. But yeah, going from 150, 200 acre farm down to an eighth of an acre in town with neighbors 6 feet away from you on either side.
Yeah.
And then getting back out to this was really a breath of fresh air. So it's, kind of tapping back to where I came from a little bit too, and which is nice.
Yeah.
Because I never ever get to go back up to Iowa. I mean, it's like once every 3 years.
Yeah.
So
tell us a little bit about, that's a good segue into the property that you have right here a long way away from me. But you've kind of had a discovery this year, coming into that property and learning what it holds. So just tell us a little bit about your place.
Well, it was weird because we drove past this property probably 5 times while we were house hunting, and this was right at the end of COVID. Everything was all our home prices were just skyrocketing. Everything's getting outrageous, but we still weren't at that interest rate hike that we had now. So we're like, we're in a pretty good spot, So we started looking pretty hard. Did a lot of fixing up on the old house, which oddly enough I had the equipment for. And we get out here to this place, and I'm like, wow, 15 and a half acres. I was like, I don't know about them power lines, though. We get out here, and once we're on the ground, you don't even notice them.
Yeah.
I mean, really the only reason that I do notice them is because of the easement.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, because I can't touch it, but other than that, I mean, I don't even know that they're there. It's just, standard.
Yeah.
Standard business. Yeah, I mean, we had power lines on the farm and everything, too, so
yeah.
It wasn't a big deal. So, I ended up, getting talked into visiting this property by my wife. So we come out and we look, and I was like, man, there is a lot that I could do with this. And we hadn't even seen the back. So the seller's father was here, and he gave us a little bit of a guided tour, which was pretty normal. Every property we went to that was over 10 acres, the owner was there to give us a tour of it. So, which I thought was cool. Pretty good dude. We had a lot of talks. He's, cut from the same cloth that I am.
Yeah.
So we went around and looked around and everything. He took us back and, showed us a little bit with the pond and everything, which, by the way, washed out within the last 8 months, so we got to put that back.
A little dry this year, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. We went back there and I looked at it. We didn't realize it at the time, but we only saw about 7 acres of the property at that point.
Really?
We didn't even see half of it. So we ended up just buying the place because the price was what we thought was very, very reasonable. So, we ended up getting it. Came out here and, through a few chat sessions with my wife and everything, we were just like, we could hunt this too. So let's maybe grab some game cameras and put them back there. Because we were already getting some of that equipment for the deer lease that we had gotten on. So, the theme for the whole thing is first year for everything.
Yeah.
So we get back there and I put up a couple of cameras and got one of my little cheapy Moultrie feeders, the $100 variety.
Yeah.
And, realized real quick that I had a herd back there that I was not ready for. They were eating probably, if I would have let them, they probably would have ate 200 pounds of feed a week, if not more.
Wow.
They figured out how to stretch up, the bucks did. Midsummer, as soon as I got that feeder out there, within 2 weeks, they were figuring out how to stretch up and lick that spinner. And it was a free-for-all all night long. I would go out there and fill it, and 2 days later, it'd be empty.
Wow.
So that went on for a while, and then I decided to raise it up, which then they got emotional, which, as you know, deer will get emotional. I found that out. They took their ball and went home. So I made them mad, and they left. All the bucks left. All I had were my 2 does, Sandy and Karen, and their kids. And that was it. That's all I had left for about a month and a half.
Yeah.
And then it got a little bit too dry, so they came back.
Yeah. So, but on top of that, the caliber of deer that we're talking here, not what you were expecting,
No.
I would imagine. Not at all. I mean, you started showing me trail cam pictures that you had from back there, and I'm like, holy cow, I need at least Mike's property across the street from me.
Hey, man, is this a good deer? Is this one worth shooting? You're like, yeah, that's a good deer.
Yeah, Mike, he shows me this picture of, I don't know, have you even put a tape to him?
No, not yet. The 10 point is at the taxidermist yet, and we didn't end up taking Demon this year. He filled out. He's spectacular right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that deer has got muscle striations all over his body. I mean, you can see the individual muscle groups in his hindquarters. Everything is clearly defined. And he sprouted another tine too, so he's an 8-pointer now.
Yeah.
And his rack is still just as tall as ever.
Wow.
So we decided to leave him alone this year.
Yeah, it's a good call. Yeah, you're showing me photos of these deer that are 140 class, pushing 150 class deer that are walking around back there, and it's absolutely crazy to think about, right, literally in your own backyard.
Very much so. The 10, I did do I mean, granted, I'm not a pro at all on this, so it was pretty much just like, well, let's see what we got. So, I mean, It's not hard to look up the requirements. So I went in and I looked everything up, and I filled out what I thought was a pretty close approximation to what they were wanting. And, that 10-pointer should have been, if he wouldn't have broken his G2, I believe he would have been a 156.
Wow.
Something like that. So,
wow.
Not bad for a deer that hasn't ever been fed, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
well, kind of for our listeners, viewers, kind of a little sneak peek there into how that story ends, I guess. But leading up into that ending, it seemed like a lot of cat and mouse going on throughout the year that you experienced as you were learning how to hunt these deer.
It was, and I always joke, coming from an infantry background, I always joke, it's like, man, hunting deer is way harder than hunting humans, And I mean, it's a joke, but yeah, there's a lot of truth to it too, because they have a infinitely better sense of smell than we do, infinitely better sense of hearing than us, and I would argue much better eyesight too. I mean, I know they can't see the reds and greens and things like that, but beyond that, I mean, their clarity, another example of me getting taught.
Mm-hmm.
I got learned one day.
Yeah.
And it was opening day of rifle season, and I'm sitting back there in a ghillie suit with a rifle tucked in between two post oaks. You would have walked right past me and not even known I was there. 60 yards away, this probably 18, 20-inch spread 6-point that has to be 4.5 years old, which I don't know how he ends up only being a 6, but weird things happen.
Yeah.
He spots me from 60 yards away, stops dead in his tracks and stares me down.
Yep.
Okay, well, guess I'm moving. So I got learned a lot.
Yeah.
With these animals, they did a lot of teaching. They're comedic as all get out. I get a kick out of watching them too.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did teach me a lot. They taught me a lot about wind and a lot about things that I didn't really have to worry about when we were doing, like military operations, things like that. I mean, it was just like we just went in and we did what we had to do. Here, when it doesn't matter if you're 150, 200 yards out or if you're 26 yards away in a bow blind, you got to know what direction that wind's at. You've got to know how hard it's blowing. You got to know what your terrain's doing to the wind. Is it swirling it down at the bottom of the hill? What's it doing? I mean, you have, if you're not accustomed to natural wind markers, you just put your own flags out, do all those little things. Everything was a learning curve for me that I knew that I had to do really, really fast, or I was going to roll a donut this year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now, wind is definitely, I'm still having to play with it and learn it and stuff. It's something that is just so frustrating. And I know our last our last week's podcast was, my dad and I sitting down in deer camp, the final weekend of general season. But it was before this hunt in particular, and I haven't told you this story, but I had my target buck, my 8-point, that I wanted to kill, and it's literally the last morning. He's been coming in 7:15-ish almost every single morning. Mm-hmm. So final morning, Sunday morning, I'm sitting there. My stand faces west in my tree stand, my feeder, and I have a southwest wind blowing. I did scent control, everything like that, and all the deer that I've seen all year in that stand have come from the west or the north. And I'm looking at them like, yeah, the north is a little iffy with that wind, but this is the last day. It's the only shot I'm going to have this buck. I got a chance at this is the only stand he's coming to. And 7:13, I'm standing there. It's getting light. I'm scanning, and I look over my shoulder to my right, and he is behind me, 40 yards, staring right at me. And I'm instantly, you see a big deer, and you're supposed to get excited. Guys talk about getting excited. As soon as I saw that deer, I was disappointed because I knew exactly what was happening. If you pointed your finger in the direction the wind was blowing, you'd be pointing at that deer. Only deer all year I've seen come out from that side. Yep. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I understand the struggle.
they will shock you at every turn, and I found that out the hard way multiple times.
Yep.
So yeah, one of my first weekends bow hunting out at the deer lease, I didn't know what I was going to see, if anything, because they were really sporadic out there at that point in time. But I got out there, and yeah, it was my fourth or fifth sit in this ground blind that I made out of some cheap Amazon camo netting that faded within like 3 hours. So don't get that. It doesn't work really well. But yeah, I got that, and I was set up out there. You know, of course, me not knowing anything about bow hunting at that point, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm out here, I'm on the ground. Yeah, I'm broken up with the camo netting, but I need to break up further. So what do guys like me do? Throw a ghillie suit on. That's a horrible idea. That was a horrible idea. So, I mean, first of all, here's the deer surprise. They like to come in with the wind in their face too. They like that directional so they can smell.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't bank on that. So I'm sitting up there north of my feeder, and the prevailing winds are always blowing south to north with some minor direction changes. Well, these does that were coming in every single day, they were button hooking around from the south. They would button hook, take a wide berth, come all the way around to the north, and then come in from dead north, right on top of my blind. 3 times they stopped right behind me, barked at me, and left.
Really?
I was a little frustrated
at
that point.
Yeah, that gets frustrating for sure.
So I decided that I was going to not do that anymore. So I left the blind there, so they knew nothing was really crazy going on or anything like that. You know, everything was pretty normal still. There just wasn't a human in there. So then they came right back. As soon as I left, the very next feed time they were there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess it was me. So didn't do that anymore. That's when I went and got the pop-up blind.
Yeah.
And set that off to basically, if you were in my bow blind, it would have been probably the 8 o'clock position. So still out of the wind window when they're at the feeder, but it was a decent 25-yard shot, depending on where they were standing. Only downside was you had to play the wind because the wind out there is insane when it wants to be.
Yep.
So you're looking at, even at 26 yards, a pretty good float right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there was times where, I remember the storm day.
Yep, I remember the storm day. That's right. Yeah.
I'm out there holding on to my ground blind so it doesn't fly away because I got caught in it. And I'm texting him, I'm like, dude, get out of your blind.
Yeah, so our properties, for those who don't know, I don't know what they are as far as the crow flies, but they're an hour or so more apart from each other probably. And yeah, it was actually our fall session production director and I were out hunting on our property, and him and I were both in stands, and we had a storm coming in, and it hit you first. And you're texting me like, hey, if you can get out of your blind, get out now. And about the time I read that text is when it started raining. I was like, nope, I'm here to stay for a little bit.
That was a brutal storm. I was not ready for that, but I did not come out empty-handed either.
That's true.
So that was my consolation gift for getting beat up by Mother Nature. And it was one of those things, I shouldn't even have gotten that. But after that whole thing's done, I'm like, okay, well, this is my last hunt out here anyway for bow, so I'm going to pack up the blind and I'm going to leave. So I get the side-by-side out there, which my side-by-side is super quiet. Super quiet. So anything within 5 miles could hear me driving that thing. So I get up there and I'm just like, I don't even care anymore because the wind and rain and everything pushed everything out. Everything was still hunkered down. I'm making all kinds of noise with this high-end piece of equipment. And I just had this feeling in the back of my head. It was like, check the other camera, check the slow glow. Let's just go home. So I get it up there and I'm climbing out and I've just started to pull up stakes on it, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. There's just something in the back of my head. Check the slow glow. Fine. So I check the slow glow. Sure enough, there's a pig down there, about 125 pounder. Perfect eater.
Yeah.
Okay, now I got another decision to make.
Yep.
Do I want to do it or not? Because, again, super quiet side by side. It was going to be a long stalk to get there, and I had to go over 2 barbed wire fences with a 50 Beowulf rifle and all this, and it was awesome. So I'm stalking this pig, And I get over the first set of barbed wire, and I get over the second set of barbed wire, and I'm coming up to where I knew he was at. So I checked the feed on my phone again. Yeah, he's still there. He's rooting around. And I get up top, and right when I turned the optic on and got my sight picture on him, I was like, uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No ears.
No ears. So I was like, well, how do I do this? So what I ended up doing was I'm a right-handed shooter, so I've got the rifle shouldered on the right, and I take my left arm and I pressed my shoulder into my left ear as I was sighted in on this pig. And I used my hand, I wrapped it around my head, and I pressed my ear closed on the other side.
Yeah.
So I shot this pig one-handed with a 50 caliber rifle with my hand wrapped around my head, protecting my ears. And I got him.
Heck yeah.
I got him. So he took off. It wasn't a great shot, but it blew his heart completely out. And I mean, everything, it was a sharp downhill angle.
So how quiet was your side-by-side after that shot?
I didn't hear a thing. So, no, I heard him squealing when he ran away. So it was one of those shots where he was running on pure adrenaline. He didn't even know he was out yet. Because when I ended up field dressing him and everything, there was no heart left.
Yeah,
it was completely gone.
On a pig that size, yeah.
But yeah, I would like to say I haven't missed with that rifle, but every time I didn't miss because of my own stupidity. Normally it's math related, or the calculations, the trig, and all that stuff. Yeah, I do something stupid, and then I look at it after. I'm like, oh, I know better than that. So I've done that twice, and it was just a stupid mistakes. Those are the only 2 misses I've had. But that rifle is so much fun with the pigs. It's a good time. But I still want to get one with the bow. I haven't gotten one with the bow yet, and that's this year's mission.
Yeah. So that was kind of another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because the archery side of hunting is kind of I guess your newest venture into hunting, aside from the property you have here and everything. This is your first year bow hunting. So what were some of the driving factors into that, and then what'd you end up getting, and let's go through that process of you learning that and everything.
A lot of it was based on safety and my comfort level of shooting in the backyard.
Yeah.
Because it's 15 acres, but we've got a lot of neighbors.
Yeah.
So I didn't really want to be ripping off high-powered rifle rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, but I also wanted to make sure that anything that I did shoot was going to be an ethical kill. I didn't want anything, getting wounded, which we can get into that here in a minute. So I wanted everything to be that high level of lethal, ethical, and making sure that I was also being very safe around the neighbors and everything. I didn't want even neighboring cattle in the pastures. I didn't want anything zinging off of a tree branch, and it's not something that I was looking for. So
right.
We did a lot of looking, and like every other newbie, I went to Cabela's. So there I was. And I had, I did some research, when you're talking rifle stuff, I could talk to you all day long and give you intricacies and details and things like that. But you're talking about a bow, I'm like, yeah, it's got the little arms and the little circle things up there, and it's got a string, and you shoot a stick out of it. It's pretty neat. And that was about that's the depth of my knowledge on bow hunting at the time. I was like, I had never shot an arrow out of a bow until this summer.
Yeah.
So, and I told the guys up there that, and to their credit, they did pretty well. They took their time. They made sure that I knew a lot of, things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. Just the sighting and making sure, where you're holding and all these, just the smallest of small things that really ruin a bow hunter from the first day. Mm-hmm. Whether it be just technique or frustration, and I quit.
Yeah.
So they did really well in that regard, and I was happy I had the guys that I did that sold me the bow. But I ended up getting a Diamond by Bowtech, and it is still as stock as it was the day I bought it. So I've done nothing with it. I know we've talked a little bit about putting new sights on, and coming from the rifle world, that single pin is just something that really appeals to me because
Yeah.
it's more akin to a front sight post, which is what I've been doing for 30 years.
Yeah.
So we're still looking at that, as far as what my setup what I want the setup to be, and different things like that. But I do like the adjustable nature of those types of optics. The one you showed me kind of got me really thinking about that,
Yeah.
and just being able to dial in is way better than doing a mid hold between pins.
Yeah.
And say, man, I hope I'm right. So
Yeah, the mid hold between pins. I mean, I run a hybrid basically, which you still have the adjustability factor like the single pin offers with those longer distances, but I'm still shooting pins out to 60, which when I built that bow, it was going out west, in which case, you have quick shot opportunities, and, you have to be able to draw back and dial in quickly, if you come up on something that's close. So with that being said, that's what made me decide, hey, 60 yards, I want it already there. If it's farther than 60, I'm going to have the time to adjust if that's the case. So that was my thought process behind it. But hunting whitetails in Texas, a single pin can definitely be an asset and help make you a better shooter, in my opinion. So
and especially in the close proximity in the backyard.
Exactly.
I could probably say I would shoot a 40-yard shot back there, but there's only 2 lanes where you can do that from where I'm set up. Other than that, I mean, you're pretty much roped in at about 28 yards max.
Well, even then, I mean, you think about how often these deer, pigs, or whatever, yeah, you might see them coming from out there, and they come through that 40-yard window, but they come into your food source, and they come in closer. So, like, I've been bow hunting for better half of 2 decades almost now at this point, and it's just, I think I've only shot 2 animals over 40 yards. I've never shot an animal over 50 yards. I've practiced out into the triple digits before, but I've killed a pronghorn antelope at 42, and there was one whitetail, the longest one I think I've shot is at 48. That's 2 shots in 16 years. So, I mean, there you go.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I did the practicing, on the driveway and everything. I did that out to 50 yards, and I was putting them in there in about a 4-inch circle with, to me, I thought that was decent, with a stock bow. Hadn't done anything, major with it, and I was happy with it, considering at that point when I stretched it out to 50, I'd only been shooting for about 4 weeks at that point. And then I realized that you get what you pay for when you're buying releases too.
yeah.
So that first release I had lasted about 5 weeks, and then all the seams broke on it, and thank God it broke when I was drawing back instead of at full draw.
Yeah.
So that's when I started doing my my normal fix-it stuff with all the toys and stuff I have in the garage, and I ended up taking the exact same one, and I said, I'm gonna make you work. And went and got a little punch kit and put my little metal studs in there, and it's held.
Yeah.
It held all the way through. I mean, I've shot 300 plus arrows out of that bow with that same one, and there's no give to it at all.
Yeah.
So
Do what you gotta do.
So it works. But yeah, I think next year I will get a little bit better release for that bow. There's a few things that we're going to improve, but it was a good learning curve, and going out there and really, all things considered, like I was talking about learning about the ghillie, which was, oh man, I can't even tell you how stupid I feel thinking that I was going to be able to get away with that. But, it was a nice thought. And you can shoot with a ghillie, you just can't have anything on your chest, which defeats the purpose of a ghillie.
Yeah.
So I abandoned that very quickly. And because I ended up missing 3 deer in the backyard. Well, 2 deer, 1 twice. So the first one I missed because of me trying to outthink myself was one of the does, and and I'm glad I missed both times, because that was a shot taken out of frustration, because I had been skunked 3 weeks in a row out in Throckmorton, and I wanted to put something in the freezer in October, and I was getting real frustrated about it. And that's just, I'm the type of person that I'm driven by success factors, and if I am not sure that I can do something, I won't do it until I'm sure I can do it. Which is, when you go to like the woodworking and things like that, I'll run that program 100 times on the computer to simulate what it's going to do. And I'll measure and remeasure and re-zero and do all these calibrations on the machine before I even turn that router on. Mm-hmm. And I very rarely have a screwed up piece of wood. Very rare. So I applied that same thing to the bow hunting and everything, and that's why I was getting frustrated, because all these things that I was absolutely certain would work are not working.
Right.
So I had to change, and that's where I started joking. I'm like, man, these things are really different than what I was used to. So yeah, I miss the doe. The first shot, one of the ghillie strings got caught in the bowstring. Slowed it down and dragged the bow down. So I shot underneath her at 14 yards.
Wow.
How did you miss at 14 yards? I could throw a spear and hit her at 14 yards. So I miss, and this is the same deer that was trying to lick me in the middle of the night when I was doing coon control.
Yeah.
Had my Vapple cover scent.
Yeah, we got you
Yes.
onto the Vapple train a little bit.
Yes, that stuff, man, that works so well. She wouldn't leave me alone. She kept coming back. Every time I moved my head, she'd bark and run off, and then 5 minutes later, she's standing right there staring at me again. This is in the pitch black. All she could do was smell me. She knew something was there. It smelled delicious.
Yeah.
And there was nothing she wanted more than to get past that camo net, but she couldn't do it. So we had a relationship built, me and these does, and me trying to take a shot at them out of frustration and everything, and thank God I missed, and she ran away, and she was at the 30-yard mark, and she just looked at me with this utter look of betrayal on her face. I'm like, sorry, and I ripped off another one. This one caught my camelback tube.
Oh no.
Dragged that one low too. Spiked that arrow right in between her front and rear legs, right in the ground, and she looked at it, looked at me, looked at it, and took off running again. I was like, all right, I think I might be done with the bow this season. Might be done. So there was one weekend left, I think, in bow season, and I was just like, all right. And I think I had talked to you in the meantime. You kind of talked me off the ledge a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was ready to put it in the case and just get the rifle out at that point. But yeah, so I went out to Throckmorton one more time, and that was where finally had a little bit of success. So got out there, and there were 3 bucks that were there right before first light, and I could see them. I could see the silhouettes, and we're just waiting until the light was right. And the light finally came through, and there was the biggest of the 3. I thought he was an 8-pointer. So, but he was big. He was definitely one of the many bucks that age that we needed to cull out. This year was the year of culls out there.
Yeah.
Because there was just so many bucks. So I was like, well, I'm not going to feel bad about taking this one. So I went and I had everything lined up, and in hindsight, I had zero business taking that shot. I didn't realize how difficult of a shot I just took. Not because of any wind conditions or anything like that, but the buck just would not position himself at that quartering away position. He was almost, I'd say about 10-30, heads 10-30 away from me.
Gotcha.
So it was very, very sharp.
Very severe. Yeah.
I had about a 3, maybe 4-inch window to slide that arrow in to hit organs.
Wow.
Somehow I did it. Didn't realize what I did at the time. So yeah, this buck takes off running. The only thing I see is a candlestick on his rear haunch, and I was like, "Did I just do a Texas heart shot?" I panicked, and I did the one thing you're not supposed to do. I started following. I saw him go, and I was like, I can't let him go. If I hit him in the leg, I'm not letting him go. I got to get him. So I wanted to make sure that I kept him in eye shot. I wanted to make sure I could see him. So he's going, and then I lose him, and I'm like, okay, cool, he's down. So, and I knew he wasn't gonna be down long. You know, if I made that horrendous of a shot, then he was going to be running. So I had to sneak on him. I had to stalk him. I had to make sure that I had a good shot, and I had to figure out where he was at. So I get up there, and I couldn't find this candlestick at all. Couldn't find the lighted knock to save my life. And then, about 10 feet away from me, he pops out like an exploding birthday cake. I mean, just out of the grass, gone. And he ran another 140 yards with this arrow sticking out of him. And I thought I needed to change my pants.
Yeah.
He scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
So I get down there where I last saw him, and it was 100 yards to the fence from where I was at, and I saw him jump over that fence. And I'm like, dude, he's not even hurt. I was like, am I even sure that I hit him? Did something happen to where it just, you know, it fell out or what? Because I could still see the arrow, like it was flopping.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even understand what's going on right now. So I get up there, and, you know, everything was so far out of my mind other than finding this deer, you know, and it wasn't anything like, oh, I got to get my buck. You know, I was like, oh no, I've got a wounded deer, you know, and I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get close enough with a bow to kill this thing. Mm-hmm. So now what do I do? What's the ethical thing to do? Do I get a rifle? And, you know, I mean, what do I do?
Right.
You know, so I'm freaking out. And before I started making phone calls and saying, hey, what do I do? I was like, I'll just look around this area one more time. And this was down by the side-by-side where he jumped the fence. About 40 yards past the fence, I was about ready just to, you know, slump over and give up. I look over and I see this little light sticking out of the grass. I was like, oh,
no way.
He's down. So I go up there, and what I thought was an 8-point, he didn't have any brow tines. They never grew.
Really?
And then he had that goofy little, like, I don't know, it looked like a little ball on the end of his main beam. So he had a goofy rack. I mean, he had some issues going on, but he was decent sized. I mean, we got as much meat out of him as we did Carrie's big one that she got out there. So, yeah. I mean, he was good sized body, just had a weird, funky looking rack.
Yeah, just a cold buck.
Yep.
So you said he was severe coring away, you had a narrow window. How deep did your arrow end up penetrating?
So my arrow shaft is 31 inches long, and there was blood 27 inches deep on the arrow.
Really?
And I went in right behind the last rib on the left side. Well, if you're looking him in the face on the right side, I went in behind the ribs. And it went through at that sharp angle, went through. I did nick his stomach, so his stomach was open.
Yeah, well, that shot, you can't help but do that.
No way around it. Straight through, 2-inch wide gash on the liver. And so there was blood everywhere.
Yeah.
When he went down finally, I mean, it was horrible. There was blood everywhere. The cork came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, through the liver, through the right lung, and it embedded in a rib bone on the other side, right up on the front towards the shoulder.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I hit as well as I think I could have, other than maybe going maybe another inch or 2 inches to the left and maybe down an inch and trying to get the heart. But at that, you know, experience-wise, there was no way I was going to be able to tell. I mean, I don't even think 2-3 years down the road I'd be able to tell on a shot like that. It's just like, oh, I got him and he's down, sweet. But that running, I think he might have lasted a long time on the ground if I would have left him where he was. And I think by pushing him, I actually made him suffer less than he would have, because the damage that happened when that arrow started working its way out when he ran, it actually did all that damage inside to where it took out those organs. And I don't think that damage was done initially. So it's like, I mean, at least that's what I'm telling myself to make myself feel better for being an idiot and chasing him. But either way, yeah, that right lung was completely shredded. You know, it was spaghetti-esque at that point. But yeah, good heart out of that one. So liver was pretty gnarly. It was mangled up pretty good. But yeah, it's a 2-inch wide broadhead. So
yeah,
it's like, it's going to take down a black bear. I guess it'll work on a deer too.
Yeah, I'd hope so. So as somebody that has come from, you know, you said yourself you have a pretty extensive knowledge of rifles and firearms and that kind of stuff. So coming from that background into archery, what has been the biggest challenge?
All of it.
All of it.
It is. You would think it's like, oh yeah, this is not going to be that big of a deal. It's just you're shooting a different weapon system. Yeah, it's true. I mean, fundamentals are fundamentals. You know, your breathing and your holds and body control and things like that. Yeah, those are all fundamentals. But there's nothing that the first time you launch an arrow out of a bow, you can't equate that to anything you do with a rifle.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing like it in the firearms world. I mean, even I would venture to say crossbows, because you're still shooting that rifle style.
Right.
There's nothing that compares to it. It's a completely different animal. And that was, you know, again, going back to learning curves, it was like, oh, this is way different than I thought it was going to be. So here I am out there every single morning after work, you know, getting off a third shift, and I get home. First thing I'm doing before I even change clothes is I'm dragging out that target, and I'm getting the bow out. I'm making sure everything's tied on it and going out there, and I'm ripping off 25 arrows every single day for 3 months before I even decided that I was going to shoot archery in October.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a whole lot. And it didn't help when my sight ring fell off.
I remember that, yeah.
For about 6 weeks. That was pretty sweet too. So yeah, after the release issue, I got that situated. I'm like, all right, cool, I'm good to go. And about 2 weeks later, my sight ring falls off. I'm like, really?
Why me?
Yeah. So, but that's when you showed me the adjustable sights and everything, you know, with your windage and elevation and all that. And I was like, oh, I really like that one.
Yeah.
Doing the range and everything.
Yeah.
So that's always been in the back of my mind since my sight ring fell off and I talked to you about it. So
Yeah.
Somebody's probably going to get some money out of me.
Yeah.
At some
Man,
point.
it's a journey. You know, yeah, you sink all this money into archery or hunting, whatever it might be, but, you know, speaking about archery specifically, it is it's a process, you know. There's no end goal, you know. It's just you go where it takes you, and then, you know, upgrade your equipment. You find something new, you find something you like better, you change something up, you don't like it, you change it again. It's just, yeah, it's a process.
Yep.
You know. So
And I'm holding off on, you know, getting like super crazy with arrow builds and things like that just yet, because I want to get the bow itself. I want to get that legit, like that. This is perfect. This is exactly how I want it. Okay, now let's dial in the arrows, and because I mean, to me, that's what I'm shooting right now. They're basically they're what, gold tip rejects or something like that. So
Yeah.
they're made in the same company. You know, they just have a different label on them, and they're cheaper.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm all about that until I learn how to actually do what I'm supposed to do. So that way I don't really feel bad about losing a $6 shaft or anything. You know, I
Yeah.
feel bad about the $20 broadhead, but not the $6
Yeah,
shaft.
man, like for me, I'm at the point where arrows are so expensive. It's like, man, I gotta shoot pass-throughs. I gotta get this thing back.
So yeah, that was one of the other things somebody at work was talking to me about was, you know, if it didn't pass through, you know, let's get your arrow weight and everything. Let's get that figured out. And I'm like, yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just for the amount of time that I'm going to spend doing bow hunting, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to focus on this year, and then next year we'll focus on the next thing, and then at some point I'll probably have to get it restrung, and then, you know, when I get it restrung, that's when we'll do the whole arrow thing, and you know, and obviously I have no real clue what I'm talking about. It's just a guessing game for me, but that's why that's why I was really happy when you moved in. Found out what you did. So I was like, yeah.
Well,
all right.
we both kind of can complement each other's weaknesses, because while I can nerd out with archery the way you can nerd out with firearms, but I don't know I have a base level of knowledge when it comes to guns, and that goes back to the first time that I ever met you.
Yep.
Was standing on your front porch with an AR-15 in my hand. Hey, can you take a look at this thing?
Right. Let's get to work. And we had it working.
Yeah, we got it working.
We had it working.
A few hours later, it was good to go. So, yeah. But another thing we want to talk about that you have going on for you over there across the way is not exclusively related to hunting, but you even mentioned it briefly earlier on, your woodworking, the stuff that you do there. How did you get into that?
I was too cheap to pay somebody else to do it.
Fair enough.
That's pretty much it. A few years ago, the wooden flags started becoming very, very popular, and a lot of veterans were starting companies that did that. And I'm just like, well, yeah, I'm not gonna pay you $200 to do something that I know is only gonna cost me $40 at Home Depot.
Yeah.
So I went and I got the wood and everything, and of course YouTube. You can get a YouTube PhD in almost any subject at this point. So I got my associate's degree in woodworking off of YouTube, and figured out how to do this. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I did it, and then of course, like everything else you do, you post it on Facebook or Instagram or something like that. So I posted it, and I've got friends that are just like, hey man, can you make me one? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So, I made a few here and there, and I can't remember even how it really got started, because at that point it was like 4 or 5, and and that was pretty much it. Because I went and got some clamps, which you can always use clamps around the house or doing something. I mean, so I had the clamps there, and it was no big deal. And then all of a sudden, it got to a thing where I started making them for people I didn't know. And these were, friends of friends or something like that. And it got to a point where I ended up making, I think it was 13 or 14 of my minis.
Wow.
In a month.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, when you see the speed at which I can throw one out now. You're just like, oh man, 13 a month, that's like, no big deal. At the time, I was doing it by hand with a Dremel.
Oh, wow.
14 of those things in 30 days. And now bear in mind, I wasn't doing them on my days that I worked. It was like crammed into 8 days. So I milled out 14 of these things by hand in 8 days. I couldn't make a fist with my right hand. And that's when I talked to the wife, and I was like, hey, if I'm going to keep doing this, we got to get a CNC machine. Mm-hmm. There's no way my hand can handle doing this many. And these were all small ones. This wasn't even a big one. Yeah. And then, your detail, like your Eagle, Globe, and Anchor for the Marine Corps, that takes like 4 hours to mill by hand.
Wow.
Just the emblem. That's not counting the stars or anything else. So we ended up getting the CNC machine, and, it kind of blossomed as a hobby from there. And of course, at that point, all the money that I was making from it, we'd do gun shows and things like that, but all the money I was making from it just paid off the machines. And we just kept buying more machines and more stuff, and it's like, okay, at some point, if this keeps going this way, we're going to actually have to like go legit. And that was the plan moving out here, was to, rebrand and go legit, which I have rebranded already. I mean, it's just, we're just waiting because, like archery, I know a lot about business. So we got to get a few things situated before we really do the kickoff on this whole thing, but everything's there. I mean, infrastructure wise, I've got the CNC machines now, and I look back at my earlier stuff, the first things that I did, and it's just like, man, that thing's ugly. And they're like, dude, you were doing it by hand with the Dremel tool.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I know, but it's ugly.
Man, that's how anybody is as you mature into a craft or a trade or something like that. Because I can remember, like, with Fall Obsession, our video editing and stuff like that, I go back and look at things that I produced 4 or 5 years ago, and it's like, that probably shouldn't still be online. I should probably delete that.
So yeah, and it's very true. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I'm gonna look back on that, that first bow kill that I had, and I was like, oh, about 5 years of like cringing every time I think about that one.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. You mature into whatever you're doing, and starting with the woodworking, doing it by hand with a Dremel, and now I've got massive machines in there that I'll do a 48-inch long flag in 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That would have taken me 2.5 weeks a couple years ago. So, I can have these things done that fast. I mean, so it's just a matter of getting things set up, and, especially getting that nice big shop that I so desperately desire.
Yeah. I think we all do out here.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Setting up and tearing down every time I change phases on woodworking is not the way to do it. That's not efficient. So, Yeah, in order to actually have a sustainable business out of this, even if it is a part-time, side business, it still has to be efficient. I can't be efficient in the situation that we're in now, so
Yeah.
it's just we're waiting.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Tell us about the name too, because I like your story behind your name.
So the first name was Wood, Torches, and Toxic Masculinity because I'm a bit of an internet troll at times, and that whole thing came out, as kind of it's a one-off. It's a play on everything that was going on in society, and kind of what I did. I mean, I played with wood, I played with the fire, so there's the wood and the torches and everything. But guys like me, we're toxic masculinity, so I'm like, okay, well, cool. There's that too.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah.
So I just did that. It was kind of a joke, and everybody pretty much by and large got it. Everybody knew it was funny. It wasn't anything serious. So never really got any blowback on that. Everybody thought it was a good time. But it's kind of a lot when you're actually looking at doing a business. It's like, there's a lot of letters in there.
Yeah.
So we wanted to shorten it up, and as a nod to kind of to my first unit that I was in, and the veteran side, I wanted to keep that connected because that's where I came from. This I mean, that whole veteran side, that's where these flags came from by and large. That's who started it. So I mean, I'm just piggybacking on what other guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, expanding some of my own things too. With like the cutting boards and stuff like that. Those things I like doing more. But as far as the name, I was like, we got to do something. So I'm talking to my friends and everything, and we're just spitballing all kinds of ideas. And I'm like, wow, these are terrible. This is some of the worst names that I've ever seen. And then there was a couple of things, my unit that I deployed with my first time, the company nickname was Wolfpack. And so that made, obviously, our company commander was Wolf 6. And I've had a lot of company commanders, and, I don't want any of them to think that, I think less of them, but seeing the ferocity in which, or hearing about it, I wasn't there, but hearing about the ferocity in which he took control on one of the worst days that we had as a unit in Afghanistan. And hearing those types of things and what the guys on the ground had actually said about how he operated that day, I was just like, yeah, that's my guy. So yeah. The whole thing is pretty much a nod to then Captain Lucas, and who's now retired and living the good life hunting antelope.
There you go.
Yeah, he's having a rough time. So it was a nod to him because, he was also one of the most personal officers that I've ever been around too. It didn't matter if you were an E8 or if you were an E1, he would talk to you, about anything. If you had an issue, if you just, hanging out, smoking and joking, whatever it was, he would be out there with you. He wasn't afraid to get dirty. That was just one of those things. And he was largely influential on, the stuff that I did. He's talked to me about, when I considered doing, OCS and things like that. He was right there. He's like, hey, you need a letter? I'll get you a letter. There's never a hesitation with him. So, yeah, it's definitely a nod to him, nod to, Bravo Company, the Wolfpack, and all that good stuff. So
that's awesome.
So, yeah, that's where that whole name came from. And then the logo itself was just kind of all the conglomeration of all the different things. I did a little bit of research on where I came from too, and it turns out that I got a little bit of that Viking in me, I guess.
I can tell by the beard. Yeah.
Weird, huh? So yeah, there's a little splash of that in my DNA too. So some of that's incorporated in there. It's just there's a whole lot going on in there, and it's all got a piece.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, before we head to, we always ask some standard questions to first-time guests on the podcast in kind of our closing. But before we get to that point, you have a story.
Oh, I do.
That you have been withholding from me.
I have.
For this purpose, to share it on this podcast regarding the conclusion to the 2022 hunting season for you.
Yeah, it's. I would have never, ever thought in a million years that I would have been able to do this.
Oh, boy.
But this is just, I don't know. I mean, this whole season has been really weird. Like there was things that I did that I shouldn't have been able to do. There's things that I don't know. It's just weird. I mean, I didn't think I was going to tag, you know, anything this year, let alone do what I did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not saying like, oh, I'm awesome or anything like that. It's just like, oh, well, that was a happy accident.
Yeah, it's surprising.
That's really what it is. It's just sheer dumb luck. I mean, from moving into a deer-infested 15-acre property to, you know, everything else. I mean, it's just all happy accidents. And next year I'll probably roll a donut as payment for this. So here I am, my last weekend out at the deer lease. And it's getting dark. And I didn't get my float day approved for the following day. So I was literally 40 minutes from shutdown because I wasn't going to be able to hunt again.
Yeah.
Nothing at the feeder, nothing on the peripheral, nothing. I look out 12 o'clock, almost directly into the sun. I was probably, 15, 20 degrees to the right of the sun. Looking there, and I see a couple of black spots on the hill. Now I range this out. This is almost 700 yards away.
Wow.
I'm not taking that shot. I mean, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Yeah.
That's not a shot I'm ever going to take on a deer.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, they don't look like they're too interested in coming towards me. You know, so there was nothing about the corn that was spectacular. They're just grazing. They're just living their best life. Enter me. And I decided, well, I'm going to stalk them. Because I've stalked this many times in my life before.
A big old donut.
Yeah, so this is dope. So I traveled 450 yards very quickly. Now, understand that the rifle that I'm shooting it's a Ruger American, but I pulled the guts out and I put an MDT ESS chassis on it, which is solid aluminum. I mean, this whole thing it weighs about 20 pounds.
Wow. It's
not a brush buster.
Yeah.
So I've got this boat anchor that I'm carrying along, and I get up to the edge of the tree line. Now I'm slowing down at that point because I'm starting to climb uphill into their field of vision. So I'm slowing down and, you know, just super deliberate, very slow steps, and I got about 200 yards away from the one. So I know what I'm zeroed at 100. I know what the ballistics are of the 6.5 round. So I'm like, okay, cool. Made a real quick adjustment. Lit the round off. She's hit. I knew she was hit right off the bat. She takes off. She goes down about 30 yards away. I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I got 2 doe tags, just filled one. Walk up there, and I'm not trying to be quiet at this. I just shot, and there's no suppressor on this thing, so yeah, cool. We're good. So I'm just kind of traipsing out there, you know, just whatever, snapping twigs and moving trees and, you know, doing whatever. And I get about 50 yards out of the tree line, making a beeline towards this down doe. And I look over to my left, and there's another doe staring at me 80 yards away. And I was like, ooh, what do I do? I had that moment of panic, and I'm like, ooh, do I win in Rome?
Yeah.
Shot her.
Wow.
Well, she took off running. Because, I mean, a 20-pound rifle, all of a sudden my adrenaline spiked. I'm not holding, I mean, you know, I held center mass on her, but I didn't have time to adjust off of that 200, and that wasn't at the forethought of my mind. So what I ended up doing is I hit low on that because she was so close. And I hit low, and I went through underneath her heart, but I went through inside the breastbone and blew out her right arm.
Wow.
So she's hurt. She knows she's hurt. And I caught up with her. I was like, man, what do I go for? Do I go for this one? Do I go for that one? What do I do? I go for the one that I think is probably still alive. So I went after her and get down there, and I see her, and she's hurt. She knows she's hurt. And I'm like, okay, I got to put her down quick. So rack another round, and I'm still about that 75-yard range. Totally slipped my mind about making my adjustment back again. You know, this time it was my fault. The first time it was just like scenario, you know, you kind of, you're going to forget something. But this time, this is just me being stupid. And I hit her again. She doesn't move. I'm like, what? Run another round through, hit her again. And then she takes off running. I was like, what is going on? So come to find out that, and I don't know how it even happened, but my windage knob got rolled.
Oh,
So I was shooting about 1.5 feet to the right.
okay.
So I was hitting her through the gut. And thankfully she went down, after that third shot, she went down. Now, bear in mind that she was only alive for about 10 minutes. I mean, this all happened very, very quickly. But yeah, I mean, got her, made sure she was down, because I was searching by flashlight. I was like, I'm not leaving until I find her, blood trail, something. So went through, and I even called Carrie. I was like, hey, you might have to come out here with the dogs. I know it's a 2-hour drive. We were getting that serious about it.
Yeah.
Then about the time I said that, I look over, and here she is. She's out. I was like, oh, good. So yeah, she went out quick after the third round. But I think the second round, I don't even think it hit her.
Really?
I think it was that far off. I mean,
wow.
with that thing being rolled. So now, bear in mind what I just told you, right? I was aiming center mass on that first doe. If I'm missing by, it got rolled to the point where it was like a foot off.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That's at 80 yards. So it's about, I don't know, 14, 15 inches off at 200 yards. That's a big, big variance. I'm like, where did I hit this doe? I got up there, I hit her in the neck.
Really?
It was a 1 in a million dumb luck shot.
Yeah.
I don't even know how any of this happened, but I dropped 2 does in 5 minutes at ranges I hadn't zeroed on a rifle that had been adjusted without my knowledge by accident.
Wow. What a finale.
Right? So that was like, okay, this just culminates. I'm not shooting a deer next year at all. They're not even going to give me a chance with as much just dumb luck that I've had this year. Going from, the 10-pointer, that was the other deer that I missed with the bow. I nicked his back, and that was because I had a shirt on that was a little too poofy on the forearms, and it caught the bowstring, and it just slapped it just enough.
They'll do that.
Sailed it up, and it went right over his back, and, that blade just ever so slightly grazed his skin. But of course, the speed that it's going, it cut him open. It was about a 2-inch cut because of their flat back and everything, but it was just a real light nick. That's all it did. But he ended up coming back, and he gave me a rifle shot.
Yeah.
So came full circle on that, but I never thought I'd see that deer again.
Yeah, deer that size, yeah.
I didn't deserve to see that deer again after what I did, but he came back. So that's why I say, I mean, like the things that happened this year, a lot of them shouldn't have happened. There's no reason that I should have even made contact with that first doe. There's no reason that second doe should have been standing there. There's no reason the 10-pointer should have come back. I mean, why?
Yeah.
So, and there's no rhyme or reason for it other than, well, I better enjoy it this year because next year's probably going to be horrible.
Well, I mean, stuff like that happens to everybody. I always say you haven't hunted unless you've experienced frustration like that. You got it all. Sounds like you got all the frustrations and all the joys at the same time in the same season. So that's a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah,
but
I like to pack it in. Like to do it all at once. Why not?
Yeah, get it all out of the way. But no, well that's a crazy story for sure, and an ending you probably won't soon forget.
No, I couldn't believe it. 2 in 5 minutes, and I mean, granted that it wasn't the cleanest thing ever, but just the fact is like, okay, well, I just tagged out on my last day at the very last moment of legal light.
Yeah.
And now I'm done.
Yeah.
And then the work started. Because
Yep.
you know what happens after that, and you
You're
know what
not
the other
done.
thing I'm doing.
You're not done.
I am not taking it to the meat processor either. So
Yep.
that was a whole learning curve too.
Oh yeah, you and me both, because we're both in that boat
Uh-huh.
this year. So yeah, doing it ourselves.
But that meat grinder makes it nice and easy.
It does. Yeah. I shot 2 deer this year, and our first one we used my in-laws' little hand crank. And then, so I asked you to borrow your sealer on the first
Yeah.
one, and I have my in-laws hand crank, and I go to take the sealer back, and you're unpacking the brand new, nice big golly, can't even talk, nice big grinder, and I'm like, well, dang it, I needed that.
Yeah, hey, I got this thing.
So the second one, you were gracious enough to let me borrow that as well, and that made what was Granted, it should. I don't know if it should be a 4-hour job or not. It took me 4 hours on the second one, but it took me about 6 hours on the first one. So,
Yeah, the trick I learned on that thing is you got to keep the meat really, really cold.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it turns into just some disgusting paste.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things that I had heard it be said on multiple, tutorials and shows and podcasts and everything. I heard it 100 times. Yeah, okay. And then you experience it for real, and you're just like, oh, God, this is really gross.
yeah.
So, yeah, made sure the meat was almost frozen every single time I put it through that grinder after that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it makes short work of a grind pile.
Absolutely did. Yeah. And I took that advice too on keeping it cold, and it turned out just fine. So, well, man, we always have a couple questions that we like to ask our first time podcast guests. The first one being, what is one of your favorite, and you may have already even talked about it, but what's one of your favorite hunting memories? And tell us about it.
The one I had the most fun with was, I got way more excited over this shot than any of the other shots, and it's from this year, and I'm sure it'll get replaced really quickly once my daughter starts getting into it and she lays her first deer down. That's probably gonna replace it in a heartbeat. But I was out there with my wife, and she was behind the trigger. And we had, this 8, 9, and 10 that we really had our eyes on. And the one that I culled out with the bow, that wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
So they were still alive. And we see one come in, and I'm glassing it, and she's glassing it, and I'm looking on the camera. I'm like, man, I can't tell. I don't know if he's the 10. I don't know. He's a 9 for sure. So, and I was like, if you want him, take him. And the lead up to this was apparently somebody didn't cook something all the way through, because I was rumbling really loud in that deer blind. And she was looking over at me with these dagger eyes every time I stopped. What do you want me to do? So I'm making all kinds of noise up there and trying not to, and she's trying to get targeted, and every time, my stomach does a hula hoop, I'm starting to laugh and everything's snickering, and she's having fun with it too. But, she got real serious when that deer came in, and it was the coolest thing, because she did something that I didn't see anybody. I've only seen one video where somebody does this. But she hit this deer and laid him down right there at the feeder.
Wow.
And he didn't run, nothing. She just completely gone, done. And I got way more excited over that, her getting that shot, and the fact that I didn't have to chase anything. That was really exciting for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably the coolest thing. And what made it even better was when we got back to camp. Of course, I get the field dress and everything done, hung him up and everything, and we go out the next morning. And when we got back to camp, we didn't see anything that morning. But we get back there, and here comes one of the other hunters and his son. And they come strolling up, and both of them had big, dumb grins on their face. And this isn't like a specific memory of one shot or anything. This is like the entire 24-hour period. It was just epic. In my mind, he comes in and does like this, Dukes of Hazzard, 180 with his side-by-side. And he's like, look what we got. He's got 2 9-pointers back there, too.
Wow.
So we had, I think one might have had a broken tine, so it was an 8 or something like that. But, basically 3 9-pointers that we had shot in about 12 hours.
Wow, that's awesome.
Between the two. But they shot theirs. His son got the first one, and then I think his came 30 minutes later.
Wow.
Same stand.
Really?
30 minutes apart.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it was a neat picture, and I think I might have shown you that picture with all 3 of them.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, we lined them all up
that.
there, and Carrie and the other 2 guys, they were out there with their deer, so we had all 3 of them lined up, and that was a really cool weekend. That was the weekend where everybody had a lot of fun out there.
Yeah.
And that's what deer leases are for, or at least part of it.
Yeah, that's hunting camp. That's what that is. So.
Yeah, and everybody there was no measuring or anything like that. It was all just like everybody was happy that somebody knocked something down.
Yeah.
I got another buddy that was out there. His wife shot a doe the day before Carrie got hers, I think. But I told him, I was like, don't worry about taking it to meat processor. We'll go ahead and quarter it out, She transport it back, and then all she got to do is throw the whole cooler in the freezer.
Yeah.
And I'll deal with it from there. I'll just grind it the whole thing, you know. So I mean, we did stuff like that, but we were just like, everybody was so happy out there that weekend. It was just a good time.
Yeah. That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely probably that's the number one right now. But like I said, it's going to get replaced as soon as Asha gets her bow setup done, or she gets behind the trigger.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. No, I can imagine. Next question. What is a bucket list hunt that you would love to do that you haven't gotten to do yet?
well, again, all of them.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen the videos with the bear hunts and stuff like that, and it just doesn't. It's like, yeah, it'd be cool, but that's not one of the things that just really gets me going. Honestly, I really like the elk hunts that I keep seeing. You know, you look at that, and I don't necessarily want to. You know, moose is like that's a bit much.
It's a lot,
But the elk that's one that I want to do at some point, and it doesn't matter if it's archery or rifle. I mean, granted, way cooler doing it with archery because you have to call them in and you're out there, you're really putting the work in on it. And the only downside to bow hunting elk is it looks like your failure rate is exponentially more than your success rate.
Yeah, it's more challenging for sure.
So yeah, but there's just a lot that goes in with that, and that's one of those things where, you know, it would have to be with a guide because, you know, again, I know a lot about hunting.
You never know. Your luck might carry into the elk scene as well. So
maybe it's got to be this year then.
Better get cracking. Yeah. Oh man. Well, the third and final question that we like to ask is always related in some form or fashion to the conversation that we've had. So I'll take it back to just the archery side, I guess, of your adventures this year. If you had to give a piece of advice to somebody in your shoes 8 months ago or however long it was, what would you say?
A lot. Study. Just pay attention to what the guys that have been doing it for a long time are doing, and that was one of the things that I made sure I did was I paid attention. You know, I would just look up YouTube videos with, you know, Texas whitetail bow hunting and just watch them. And some of them I'm just looking at these guys like, all right, y'all are clowns. And then there's other ones where it's like, that's legit, you know. And then I'm looking up, you know, how to zero. I'm like, I didn't know how to zero bow.
Yeah.
It's not the same as a rifle.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I'm looking up all that stuff. I mean, it's like anything else. If you're gonna make the investment in it, I mean, the best thing I would say is really make that time investment too.
Yeah.
A monetary investment is one thing, but you can have a $10,000 setup on a 50, you know, Barrett or something like that and not have a single clue how to hit that 1 mile target because you don't know anything about the ballistics.
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing as with archery. You know, you got to know how to use the equipment that you're buying. Otherwise, it's just a waste of money. It's something pretty to put on a wall.
Yeah.
And by putting that time investment in, you'll get a much bigger return. Now, I mean, I wouldn't consider my return big as far as like meat in the freezer because it was just that one. But the amount of knowledge that I gained this year through making all these mistakes, and some of them were mistakes that I knew about. I knew they were mistakes when I did them anyway, just for whatever reason, you know. I mean, I can do it different. I can make this work, you know, whatever it is. No, you can't.
Well, I was gonna say it's you have gained you have one deer under your belt, your first deer with a bow, and you've gained some invaluable experience, you know, that will only benefit you moving forward. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, rightfully so.
And oddly enough, the first deer that I've ever taken, other than with a car, first deer I ever took hunting, like intentionally taking a deer, was with a weapon that I had never used before in my life. Yeah. A weapon system that I'd never used before in my life.
Wow. I hadn't thought of it like that. That's crazy. Wow.
So, I thought that was interesting too. That was just another one of those takeaways. Like, you don't have to go. I mean, yeah, you want to know your way around what you're using, but and again, going back to that prep time, put the time investment into it. I was listening to like the Black Rifle guys talking about going up and shooting elk and everything, and like Evan Hafer's saying he's shooting like 80 arrows a day on the month leading up to the elk hunt. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but
Right.
80 arrows, I'm like, well, if he's doing 80, I mean, I've never done this before, so I'm thinking like maybe 20, 25 a day. And that's where I got that from.
Yeah.
I mean, he's putting the time investment in. So if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me.
Man, that's what I encourage folks to do. It doesn't even have to be a number. Now, obviously, if you are going out west or stuff like that, there's a little bit more prep involved with that. And I know when we did that for a couple years and planning on doing it this next year, we'll be sure that we're spending time with some longer ranges. Now I have the space to do it at my own place, so that's kind of nice. But,
well, if you need to go longer, I mean, I know it's a long drive, but I've got a little room back there too.
Yeah, I'll find a day where I can make it work. Yeah. But yeah, it's you adjust and you do what you can, but the important thing is just, and as the repetition and doing it every single day, whether it's 20 or 80 or 5 or 50. Yep. Just getting out there and shooting your bow. There's another, I know a lot of people watch the Working Class Bow Hunter podcast, and that's their motto behind their podcast is just go shoot your bow. And it's so simple and serves a good purpose. So.
Eventually you'll figure out something that you're like, man, I just don't like this. You'll find these little tweaks that you make. You're like, oh, if I do this, and some of it might just, it might be something that's like, oh, duh, I should have probably done that a year ago. But then there's other stuff. It's like, well, everybody's saying this doesn't work, but it works really well for me.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing too. I mean, there's people, and when you're talking trigger squeeze, there's people that say, oh, you only shoot with your fingertip. Then there's other guys that, like they'll curl their entire finger around the trigger, and some of the best shots I've ever seen. It's just ridiculous. But, just it's whatever you're comfortable doing, as long as it's not just a terrible technique.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things. But even with rifles, I mean, my daughter was down in the middle of the floor with the bolt gun, and she was shooting potato chip bags in the pantry. But she was literally just, I told her, I was like, yeah, go ahead, get behind it and get used to it.
Yeah.
And she was back there, and she was rolling the bolt back and doing everything she needed to do, and she'd make that trigger squeeze after she got her sight picture, and I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Repetition. Well, Mike, we'll wrap up the podcast for this episode, but I really appreciate you coming over and spending some time to share your story and your many experiences. It's been awesome.
I appreciate you having me. I was honestly, when I texted you that day, I was totally joking.
I wasn't, man. This is what I love. I love getting people on the podcast that, have these unique experiences or unique stories, interesting stories, whatever the case might be, and giving them an outlet to share it with more people, because for all I know, nobody else might ever know about that. That you go back through our guest list on our podcast, and you can pick out quite a few people that names you've never heard from, but they're interesting individuals, and that's one thing that we want to do through this is tell their story. So.
Yeah, and there's always something, whether it's things not to do, which I wrote the book on that this year, or things to do. There's always something. I mean, everybody's got this one thing, and you can either take it or leave it, but there's always options out there. You can always learn from somebody else, and, especially, one of the things that's still hard for me too is, but, when somebody comes up and critiques you, I mean, we all like to think we're perfect, and I'm pretty close, but there's a few things, like somebody should have slapped me upside the head when I put a ghillie suit on during bow season and said, no, stop. But, it is what it is.
It is.
But, I mean, I'm sure somebody out there makes ghillie suits work with a bow.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that do that.
Probably on
me.
Probably find it on YouTube University, I'd imagine.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. But yeah, it's definitely not me. I am completely abandoning the ghillie suit idea when it comes to archery.
Yeah, there you go. Well, for our listeners, our viewers, thank y'all for tuning in to another week's episode. If you haven't already, hit follow and subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on. We're on all major podcast platforms, as well as our YouTube channel, Carbon TV, and our website, fallobsession.com. So be sure that you subscribe and turn your notifications on. We put out a new podcast episode every single Monday morning. You can also listen to our podcast on the Outdoor Call Radio app or 1350 ESPN with Outdoors Dan over there in the Midwest. Fallobsession.com is our website. That is the hub. That's where you guys can go to find all of our content right there, as well as our apparel. And then be sure that you go to the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Go Wild, and follow Fall Obsession on those. We post daily information relevant to you guys and where you hunt in different areas across the country. So last but not least, Ridge Rock Hunt Company. They're the podcast partner. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they do a great job of setting up folks with trusted and vetted outfitters across the country. Derek has a very big network of outfitters in North America, and he will work with you as far as price, timeline, licensing, all that kind of stuff to get you set up with a good experience. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company, go check them out on Facebook, Instagram, and their website. Thanks again, man. We'll do it again sometime.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. We're back again next week for another episode, and we'll catch you then.